Hi, I'm Juan Pena. Thank you for joining my show. In the next 12 weeks, I will be talking about watercolor, and primarily watercolor on paper.
Hey, I want to give a big thumbs up for Juan Pena's watercolor classes. He's a fabulous artist, an outstanding person, and a really good storyteller, so you can't ask for a better combination in a teacher.
Remember to pause your video at any time. That way you can take these classes at your own pace. Read your email syllabus. I will send an email syllabus for each class. Set your workspace ready to go near a large window, preferably north light. Have your workspace near the window and your computer nearby so that you can watch the lesson and participate with us. To save money, an egg carton is handy for mixing color. Plus the brushes I recommend. Lesson 1, and the materials list and 4 clips to hold our paper down. For smaller sheets of paper, you may use smaller clips. 3 brushes to paint with and 1 large brush to spread water and paint large areas. First, with a large brush, we will spread water on our paper, thoroughly wetting the paper, and then tilting it in all 4 directions. Tilting your paper in all 4 directions ensures that you have spread the water evenly. Let your paper dry until the shiny surface turns to a satin glow. At this point, you may stretch your paper by holding the clips open and pulling the paper towards the clip. Now you are ready to start painting. Since the paper is still wet, this is a good time to start painting wet into wet. 2 water containers, one to clean your brushes, the other for your color. It's desirable to have clean water for mixing with your color. Clean your brushes. Dark sepia is demonstrated by thick, dark color on your palette. If you tilt your palette forward, it will not run. It's a dark sepia color. Add water and your color becomes lighter. Your values change by adding water. Painting wet into wet requires wet paper. Be sure and wet your paper for this exercise. You may work with 1 panel. For the next few lessons, I will work with 4 panels. This will be just a little start on how to put watercolor as fresh as possible, and we'll try for some different effects. Start with a very dark sky on this end, and remember that wet into wet gives us the softest edges possible. So we don't have to worry about our brush strokes. All we have to worry about is the amount of pigment in our brush. And you'll notice that in some areas it could get very heavy and thick. And when we're first starting out wet into wet, it looks very dark, but it's going to dry. In this panel, it's fairly dry, still a little moist in spots, and I'll skip along demonstrating some dry brush, and all that I'm doing here is skipping along the surface of the paper with a brush parallel to the paper. And then a little bit darker because it's still wet at the top of our wash. Since we've moistened that with a wash, we can come back into those first beginning washes and put a little more pigment into those areas. Then down here we'll do a little experimentation with water. We'll use a different brush to put water in helter skelter and see what happens. It's important that at the beginning stages of your painting that you try to experiment as much as possible. I strongly encourage you to experiment with different effects, try different things. You'll notice that it dries in hard edge in some spots. Others, it bleeds into that soft, wet area, making a very soft color. And we're trying to do something different from the other two panels, and I'm going to get rid of some of those hard edges right here, but leave some dry brush. And again, I can come through here, darken areas. I don't have to worry about my brush strokes. They're going to disappear. They're going to soften out because the paper is wet. Some may remain, but that's the experimental part. Now, I mentioned that we were going to experiment with both of these panels. And with this, I'm going to re-wet some of the areas that we've already painted and see what happens when we put just plain water on those areas. You'll notice that it creates what we call in watercolor a bloom. We can eliminate unwanted washes by simply adding water and taking our paper napkin and softening areas. We can go into those after we've moistened them and create some nice splashy effects if it's the ocean that we're wanting to paint. Once your preliminary washes have dried, you may try painting over them with a glaze. In this lesson, what I'm trying to illustrate to you is that we want to work direct as possible, no matter what happens. Let it happen. There's some very interesting backwashes from the paper above is coming down into our wash and created this interesting area. Maybe we can do something with it, or maybe we can't. But don't fret about accidentals like that. They can become very interesting in your painting. We'll start with a background off in the distance and wet into wet. Want just pigment, or as thick as possible, and I'll put that in off in the distance. and then soften the edges with some scumbling. And we have a hillside, a whole ridge in just one or two brush strokes. This panel, we're watching what is happening with this. I'm not sure what to do with it right now, but I'll ignore it and continue with what I call the definitive wash. The definitive wash is always experimental. Experimenting with the sides of the brush, with the flat side of the brush, working in these areas, trying to create the sense of what we saw in the on-location video shots. Different types of trees, pine trees. Around here we have a lot of domestic type trees because people live out here. And so you're going to find cemetery trees, some dark trees, and the dark trees I want to silhouette lighter trees. So, and again, we're going to, with this definitive wash, notice that our background color has dried, so I can come back with some water in there, just plain water, making an area a little bit lighter. If it's not light enough, we can always come back in with our sponge or a paper towel. Now, some pine trees, oaks, all the type of trees we have here in the foothills. So I'm playing with this edge. Might use a different brush. Use a small brush like a large brush. But here I'll put some trees going up with this brush. Off in the distance. This, again, this is going to dry a lot lighter than you think. So you use that brush different, and we'll try and put an interesting edge undulating up and down throughout that horizon. Put some very distant hills in the background and lighten them with just plain water. Then when we're putting these washes down, don't forget the trees in front of some of these background washes. The hills also should illustrate something about the foreground. If it's a dark hill in the background, then a lighter hill in the foreground is nice. So all that I'm trying to demonstrate at this stage is to apply the paint as fresh as possible. Paint with water, lots of pigment, experiment a little bit, and see what happens when you apply the watercolor to the paper. This concludes our lesson.